spotted leopard cub, trapped by poachers, its desperate act to survive. The wire bit into soft flesh with cruel precision. The cub's hind leg, still spotted with the rosettes of youth, twisted at an unnatural angle as the metal snare tightened. A cry tore through the humid afternoon air of the Indian forest. Not quite a roar, not quite a mewl, but something raw and primal that spoke of terror and incomprehension. The young leopard thrashed once, twice, then went still, golden eyes wide with shock as blood began to mat the tawny fur around the trap. 15 meters away, hidden in the dense undergrowth of sal trees and bamboo thickets, Arjun Mehta froze mid-step. The wildlife veterinarian had been tracking signs of illegal activity in this sector of the Madhya Pradesh Reserve for 3 days now. Empty cartridges, disturbed soil, the acrid smell of human presence where none should be. But he hadn't expected to find this, a leopard cub, no more than 5 months old, caught in a poacher's snare designed for something larger, perhaps a deer, perhaps even an adult leopard whose pelt would fetch thousands on the black market. The cub's breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps, its ears flattened against its skull as Arjun slowly emerged from cover, hands raised, voice low and steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Easy," he murmured in Hindi, though he knew the animal couldn't understand the words, only the tone. "Easy, little one. I'm not going to hurt you." If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and stay with us. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Late afternoon light filtered through the canopy in dusty columns, illuminating dancing insects and the slow drift of pollen. Somewhere distant, a troop of langur monkeys called their evening alarm. Closer, much closer, Arjun heard what he dreaded most. Voices, human voices. Rough laughter carried on the breeze, along with the distinct sound of boots crushing through undergrowth. The poachers were returning to check their traps. Arjun's mind raced through impossible calculations. The cub weighed perhaps 12 kilograms, small enough to carry, but with claws and teeth sharp enough to tear through clothing and flesh. The snare was professional grade, the kind that tightened with every movement, designed to hold until the trappers arrived. To free the animal, he would need to sedate it first, but that required time he didn't have. The voices were getting closer, maybe 3 minutes away, 2 if they were moving quickly. The leopard cub watched him with eyes that seemed far too aware. There was intelligence there, beneath the pain and fear. A wildness that had not yet learned to associate humans with danger, because this young creature had likely never encountered a person before today. Its mother would have kept it hidden, teaching it to hunt rats and small birds in the safety of their den until it was old enough for bigger prey. Where was the mother now? Arjun scanned the surrounding forest with growing dread. Adult leopards were notoriously elusive, capable of moving like shadows even in daylight. But a mother defending her cub was a different creature entirely. 3 meters of muscle, fang, and fury that would attack without hesitation. If she was nearby, if she was watching, but no golden shape materialized from the trees. No warning growl rumbled through the air. The forest remained quiet except for the approaching voices and the cub's labored breathing. "Should check the East Ridge traps first," one voice was saying, words carrying clearly now through the still air. "That's where we saw the pug marks yesterday." "This sector first," another voice countered, older and carrying authority. "I set a fresh snare near the waterhole. Something big has been coming through." Arjun's jaw tightened. He recognized that voice. Rajan Sharma, a former forest guard who'd been dismissed 2 years ago for suspected involvement in wildlife trafficking. The man knew these woods better than most, knew where animals traveled, where they drank, where they were most vulnerable. He'd taken that knowledge and turned it into profit, selling endangered species piece by piece to buyers in distant cities. The cub made a small sound, somewhere between a whimper and a hiss. Blood was pooling beneath its trapped leg now, darkening the leaf litter. Shock would set in soon if it hadn't already. Without treatment, even if the animal somehow escaped, infection would kill it within days. Arjun made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. He dropped to his knees beside the cub, moving with deliberate slowness despite the urgency screaming through his veins. The animal's ears flattened further, and it bared tiny fangs, no longer than a house cat's, but capable of delivering a savage bite. "I know," Arjun whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own pulse. "I know I'm terrifying, but they're more terrifying, little one. Trust me on this." He shrugged off his field jacket, and in one fluid motion threw it over the cub's head, covering its eyes and muffling the immediate instinct to bite. The animal thrashed beneath the fabric, but Arjun was already working, fingers finding the snare's locking mechanism. It was spring-loaded, ingeniously simple and brutally effective. Release the pressure wrong, and it would tighten further. Do it right, and click. The wire loop sprang open. The cub exploded into motion, claws raking through denim and drawing blood from Arjun's forearm before he could pull back. But he'd expected that, braced for it. What mattered was that the animal was free, scrambling away from him on 3 legs, the injured fourth held awkwardly off the ground. It made it perhaps 5 meters before collapsing in a heap, sides heaving. "What was that?" Rajan's voice, suddenly sharp with alertness. "Did you hear that?" Boots began moving faster through the undergrowth. 30 seconds, maybe less. Arjun lunged forward, scooped the cub up with jacket and all, feeling claws rake again across his chest through his shirt. The animal was surprisingly light, all bones and spotted fur and wild heartbeat against his ribs. It struggled weakly, mewling in pain and confusion. "Move! Move! Move!" Arjun breathed to himself, turning and plunging into the densest part of the thicket, away from the voices, away from the clearing. Thorns tore at his clothes and face, but he barely felt them. Behind him, he heard the poachers enter the trap site. "The snare's been triggered." Rajan's voice exploded with fury. "The catch is gone. Someone's been here. Fresh blood on the ground, boss. And look, tracks leading west. Find them. Find whoever did this. Now!" Arjun's lungs burned as he pushed deeper into the forest. The leopard cub clutched against his chest like a living grenade. Every few seconds, small claws would find purchase through the jacket and dig into his skin, reminding him that he was carrying one of nature's most efficient predators, even if this one barely weighed as much as a medium-sized dog. The terrain sloped downward, treacherous with loose stones and exposed roots. Arjun's boots slipped on moss-covered rocks as he half ran, half slid toward the ravine he knew cut through this section of the reserve. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but never disappeared entirely. Rajan and his men knew these woods. They would spread out, cut off escape routes, move with the practiced efficiency of men who'd hunted here for years. The cub whimpered again, a sound that cut through Arjun's focus like a blade. He risked a glance down at the bundle in his arms. Blood was seeping through the jacket fabric now, warm and sticky against his forearm. The animal was going into shock, its breathing too fast and shallow. If he didn't stop soon to treat the wound, the rescue would be meaningless. But stopping meant being caught. Arjun's mind flashed back 7 years to another forest, another desperate chase. He'd been fresh out of veterinary school then, assigned to a wildlife rehabilitation center in Maharashtra. A tigress had been found dying from infected wounds, caught in a poacher's trap, much like this one. He'd worked for 6 hours straight trying to save her, but the infection had spread too far, sepsis already shutting down her organs. She died on the table while he held pressure on a bleeding artery, her amber eyes dimming as he whispered useless apologies. He'd found her 2 cubs the next day, orphaned and starving in their den. Neither survived the week. That was when something fundamental had shifted inside Arjun Mehta. The textbook knowledge, the clinical detachment they'd taught him in university, all of it had crumbled in the face of those small, still bodies. He'd realized then that wildlife veterinary work wasn't about treating individual animals. It was about fighting a war, a quiet, desperate war against greed and indifference, fought one creature at a time. He'd joined the anti-poaching task force 3 months later. The ravine appeared suddenly, a jagged tear in the earth, where monsoon rains had carved away soil and stone over centuries. Arjun skidded to a stop at the edge, breathing hard. Below, a thin stream trickled over rocks, maybe 4 meters down. Dense vegetation covered both slopes, bamboo, wild ginger, and creeping ferns that could hide a man if he was careful. And more importantly, it would mask his scent. Arjun lowered himself over the edge, boots finding precarious holds on the rocky slope. The cub squirmed weakly in his arms, mewling in distress. I know, Arjun murmured, his voice barely a breath. Just a little further. Stay with me. He reached the bottom and immediately moved upstream, wading through ankle-deep water that soaked his boots but would break his trail. The stream bed wound between walls of stone and root, a natural corridor that headed northwest toward the reserve's core zone. If he could reach the patrol station there, he'd have backup, medical supplies, and most importantly, authority to arrest Rajan and his crew. That was still 8 kilometers away, through difficult terrain, with a bleeding leopard cub and armed poachers behind him. Arjun found an overhang where the stream had undercut the bank, creating a small hollow barely large enough for a man to crouch in. He wedged himself inside, finally setting the cub down on a bed of dry leaves he quickly gathered. With trembling fingers, he carefully peeled back his jacket. The leopard cub lay motionless now, only the rapid rise and fall of its sides indicating life. Up close, in the dim light filtering through the overhang, Arjun could see how young it truly was. The spots were still fuzzy at the edges, the face still round with baby fat. A female, he noted clinically. Her eyes, half closed now with exhaustion and pain, were the deep blue gold of a juvenile, not yet the full amber of adulthood. The wound was worse than he'd feared. The snare had cut through skin and muscle, possibly damaging tendons. The leg was swelling rapidly, and the bleeding, while not arterial, was steady. Without proper treatment, the cub would lose the leg to infection. With proper treatment, she might keep it, might even recover full mobility, given time and her species' remarkable healing capacity. But first, he had to keep her alive long enough to get that treatment. Arjun's emergency kit was back at his camp, 3 kilometers east, exactly where he couldn't go now. All he had were the contents of his pockets, a multi-tool, a water bottle half full, some energy bars, and his phone, which showed no signal this deep in the ravine. He used his knife to cut strips from his already ruined shirt, fashioning a makeshift bandage. The cub's eyes snapped open when he touched the injured leg, and she tried to bite, but the movement was weak, uncoordinated. Arjun worked quickly, wrapping the wound tight enough to slow the bleeding, but not so tight as to cut off circulation. "You're a fighter," he told her softly as he worked, hands steady despite everything. "Your mother taught you that, didn't she? To never give up." The thought of the mother leopard brought a fresh wave of worry. Where was she? Had she been caught in another trap, killed by the poachers? Or was she out there somewhere, following the scent of her cub, driven by instincts older than humanity itself? Adult leopards could track their young over vast distances. If the mother was alive and free, she would be searching, and if she found Arjun with her cub, he pushed the thought aside. One crisis at a time. The bandage secured, Arjun cupped water from the stream in his palms and offered it to the cub. She turned her head away at first, suspicious, but thirst eventually won over fear. Her small pink tongue lapped weakly at the water. It wasn't much, but it was something. Above them, distant sounds of movement filtered through the forest canopy. The poachers were ranging wider now, calling to each other in codes Arjun couldn't quite make out. They would search for hours if necessary. Rajan wasn't just angry about losing a catch, he was worried. Worried that whoever had freed the cub would report the snares, bringing the full weight of the forestry department down on his operation. He was right to be worried. Arjun pulled out his phone again, angling it in different directions, trying to catch even a single bar of signal. Nothing. The ravine walls were too high, the canopy too thick. He'd need to climb out, expose himself on higher ground to make a call. Later, when the poachers moved on, when he was sure, he settled back against the cool stone, the leopard cub curled in a tight ball beside his leg. She was watching him now through slitted eyes, her breathing gradually slowing to something closer to normal. The initial shock was passing, but she remained utterly still, conserving energy with the instinctive wisdom of a wild creature. Arjun found himself studying her face, the delicate whiskers, the tiny scars already marking her muzzle from rough play with siblings or early hunting attempts. How many times had she curled up just like this with her mother, warm and safe in some hidden den? How many sunrises had she seen? How many monsoon storms had she weathered in her brief life? 5 months, maybe 6 at most. Such a short time to have existed, such a long future still possible if he could just get her to safety. "I won't let them have you," Arjun whispered, the words a promise to the cub, to himself, to the memory of that tigress who died in his arms. "I won't let them turn you into a trophy or a traditional medicine ingredient or a pet for some collector who thinks wildness can be owned. You're meant for these forests. You're meant to grow up and have cubs of your own someday, to hunt and roam and be exactly what you were born to be." The cub blinked slowly, a gesture that in the language of cats sometimes meant trust, sometimes simply exhaustion. Her small body radiated heat against his leg, her heartbeat visible in the pulse at her throat. Time stretched in the hidden hollow beneath the earth, measured only by the trickle of water over stone and the slow rotation of light through the canopy above. Arjun counted his own breaths, forced himself to remain still and silent, every sense attuned to the forest around them. An hour passed, then another. The sounds of pursuit gradually faded to the north. Either the poachers had given up, or they'd moved their search to another sector. Arjun waited another 30 minutes to be certain, then carefully extracted himself from the overhang. The cub lifted her head weakly as he moved, a small questioning sound escaping her throat. "We're moving again," Arjun told her gently, gathering her back into his arms, with the jacket cushioning her body. She was lighter than before, or perhaps he'd simply gotten used to her weight. "Just a bit further, I promise." He climbed out of the ravine on the opposite side, using roots and rocks as handholds, while cradling the cub with one arm. His muscles screamed in protest, scratches and cuts burning with sweat and dirt, but he didn't stop until he reached level ground again. The forest had changed character here, older trees, wider spacing, less undergrowth. The light was softer, filtered through multiple layers of canopy, and in the distance, perhaps 3 kilometers away if he'd judged correctly, should be the patrol station. Arjun adjusted his grip on the cub and started walking. The forest grew darker as Arjun pushed northwest, the late afternoon sun sinking behind the thick canopy until only fragments of light penetrated to the forest floor. The leopard cub had gone completely still in his arms, not unconscious but in that state of profound exhaustion where the body shuts down everything non-essential to preserve life. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her heart beating against his forearm like a small, persistent drum. Arjun's own exhaustion was catching up with him now. The adrenaline that had fueled his escape was burning off, leaving behind the heavy weight of depleted muscles and accumulated injuries. His forearm, torn by the cub's initial panic, throbbed in time with his pulse. Scratches across his chest and face stung with every movement. But he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, navigating by memory and the slowly dimming light. He'd covered perhaps 2 kilometers when he saw the first marker. It was subtle. A strip of orange plastic tied to a low branch, the kind that survey teams used. But Arjun knew immediately it was something else. Poachers marked their territory too, creating invisible boundaries that warned competitors away from productive hunting grounds. The plastic was faded, suggesting it had been here for months, maybe longer. His stomach tightened, as he looked around with new eyes. Now that he knew what to search for, he saw them everywhere. More markers, disturbed earth where traps had been set and reset, trees with bark stripped away at specific heights, message boards where poachers left coded information for each other. This wasn't just Rajan's crew operating opportunistically. This was organized, systematic. A section of the reserve had been carved into a private hunting ground, and the authorities had no idea. Or did they? The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. Arjun had worked with enough forestry departments to know that corruption wasn't rare. Low pay, dangerous work, isolated postings, these created opportunities for compromise. A few thousand rupees to look the other way. A percentage of profits to ensure patrols went to the wrong sectors at the wrong times. It happened more often than anyone wanted to admit. The patrol station he was heading toward, could he trust whoever was there? Arjun stopped walking, his mind racing through calculations and risks. If the station was compromised, he'd be walking the cub directly into the hands of the men who'd trapped her. But if he avoided it, the nearest alternative was the reserve headquarters, another 15 kilometers through difficult terrain, in darkness, with a critically injured animal. The cub stirred in his arms, making a sound that was heartbreakingly small. Her injured leg twitched, and she whimpered as pain cut through whatever dreams or half-conscious thoughts occupied her fading awareness. "I know, little one," Arjun murmured. "I know it hurts." He carefully lowered himself to sit against a massive sal tree, its trunk wide enough to hide him from casual view. He needed to think, needed to make the right choice, because the wrong one would kill them both. His phone still showed no signal, but he pulled it out anyway and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for, Priya Desai. She was a senior ranger he'd worked with on 3 previous anti-poaching operations, someone whose integrity he'd personally witnessed. If anyone at the patrol station could be trusted, it would be her. But was she even on duty tonight? And how could he get a message to her specifically without alerting anyone else? The light continued to fail around him. In the growing darkness, the forest came alive with different sounds. Night birds called their territories. Something large moved through the underbrush perhaps 30 meters away, a sambar deer, by the sound of it, moving toward water. And beneath it all, the constant chorus of insects, a wall of sound that would mask both his presence and that of anyone hunting him. Arjun gently unwrapped the makeshift bandage to check the cub's wound. Even in the dim light, he could see the swelling had worsened. The flesh around the injury was hot to the touch, the early signs of infection already taking hold. The cub flinched when he probed gently, her small body going rigid with pain. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He rewrapped the wound with a fresh strip of cloth, tighter this time, though he knew it was inadequate. What she needed was antibiotics, surgical cleaning of the wound, fluids to counteract shock and dehydration. What she needed was a fully equipped veterinary facility. What she had was a tired man with empty pockets and dwindling options. Arjun closed his eyes and forced himself to think past the exhaustion and fear. He was a trained wildlife veterinarian with 7 years of field experience. He'd treated animals in worse conditions than this. He'd performed emergency surgery in the back of moving jeeps, stabilized patients with improvised equipment, kept creatures alive through sheer stubborn refusal to let them die. He could do this. He had to do this. But first, he needed to know what he was dealing with. Arjun stood carefully, settling the cub into a more secure position against his chest. He moved through the darkening forest with renewed purpose, no longer heading directly toward the patrol station, but angling southeast toward a rocky outcrop he remembered from previous surveys of this sector. It rose above the canopy, a granite formation that jutted up like a broken tooth. From its peak, he'd be able to see for kilometers in every direction. And more importantly, his phone would have a clear line of sight to the nearest cell tower. The climb was treacherous in the fading light, made worse by the fact that he needed to keep one arm secured around the cub at all times. She was awake now, her eyes reflecting what little light remained like twin golden coins. She watched his face as he climbed, no longer struggling, perhaps understanding on some instinctive level that this human meant survival, or perhaps simply too weak to fight anymore. The thought terrified him more than the armed poachers behind them. It took 20 minutes to reach the outcrop's peak, and by then full darkness had descended. The forest below was a black sea, broken only by the faint silver ribbons of streams catching moonlight. In the distance, Arjun could see scattered lights, villages on the reserve's border, the glow of the main road cutting through the valley, and there, perhaps 4 kilometers northwest, a cluster of lights that marked the patrol station. He pulled out his phone. 2 bars of signal. Weak, but possibly enough. He scrolled to Priya's number and composed a text message, each word carefully chosen. Emergency. Trapped leopard cub. Injured. Poachers active Sector 7. Need discreet extraction. Trust concerns. Can you respond alone? M. His thumb hovered over the send button for a long moment. Once he sent this, there would be no taking it back. If Priya's phone was being monitored, if she'd been compromised, if he'd misjudged her character, this message would reveal his location and intentions. The cub made a small sound, drawing his attention. She was looking up at him with those impossibly large eyes, her small face a perfect mask of feline features not yet hardened by maturity. There was trust there now, he realized, fragile and new, but unmistakable. She was depending on him to make the right choice. Arjun pressed send. The message went through after a few seconds of delay. He watched the screen, waiting, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his temples. 1 minute passed, 2, 3. Then, where are you? I'm alone at station. Others on patrol till 2300. PD. Relief flooded through him so intensely it left him lightheaded. But he forced himself to remain cautious. How do I know you're alone? He typed back. The response came quickly. Remember the tigress in Maharashtra? You told me about her cubs. You said the male had 1 white whisker. No one else knows that story. PD. Arjun's breath caught. He'd shared that memory with Priya 2 years ago, during a long night stakeout, when exhaustion and darkness had loosened the careful walls he kept around his grief. She was right. No one else knew that detail. He'd never written it in any report, never mentioned it to another colleague. I'm at the granite outcrop, Sector 7 eastern boundary, he typed. Cub is in shock, infected leg wound. I need antibiotics, fluids, surgical kit, and I need to know who else is involved. The pause before her response was longer this time. When it came, the words confirmed his worst fears. Half the station, including the supervisor, been going on for at least a year. I've been gathering evidence, but it's not enough yet. Can you make it to the old watchtower, 2 kilometers north of your position? Abandoned for 5 years, but still structurally sound. I'll meet you there in 90 minutes with supplies. PD. Arjun read the message 3 times, committing the details to memory before deleting the entire conversation. He looked down at the cub, who had curled into the smallest possible ball against his chest, conserving heat as the night air cooled. 90 minutes, he told her softly. Can you hold on for 90 more minutes? She didn't answer, of course, but her small chest continued to rise and fall, her heart continued to beat, and for now, that was enough. Arjun began the careful descent from the outcrop, moving slowly in the darkness, testing each foothold before committing his weight. The forest at night was a different world, filled with sounds and movements that the day kept hidden. Eyes reflected his phone's dim light from the underbrush. A jungle cat, perhaps, or a civet. Something large splashed in a stream nearby, probably a wild boar coming to drink. And somewhere out there, he knew, Rajan and his crew were still searching, still hunting. The old watchtower loomed out of the darkness like a skeletal hand reaching for the sky. It had been built decades ago when the reserve was first established. a 3-story wooden structure designed to spot forest fires and monitor animal movements. Budget cuts and technological advances had made it obsolete, and nature had begun the slow work of reclaiming it. Vines wound up the support pillars, and the wooden stairs groaned ominously under Arjun's weight. But the upper platform was still solid, and more importantly, it was defensible. Anyone trying to climb up would be heard long before they reached the top. Arjun settled into the far corner with the cub, arranging his jacket as a makeshift nest. He checked his phone, 40 minutes until Priya was due to arrive. The cub's breathing had grown more labored, a slight rattle now audible on each exhale. Her body temperature seemed to be dropping, the shock and blood loss finally overwhelming her system's ability to compensate. He pulled her closer to his own body heat, wrapping her carefully in what remained of his shirt. "Stay with me," he whispered urgently. "Don't you give up. Your mother is out there somewhere, waiting for you. You have to stay alive so I can find her, so I can reunite you. Do you understand? You have to fight." The cub's eyes opened briefly, fixing on his face. Then they closed again, her breathing becoming shallower. Arjun began to pray to gods he'd stopped believing in years ago, making desperate bargains in the darkness while the forest whispered secrets around them and time stretched toward an uncertain dawn. 37 minutes had passed when Arjun heard the sound. Not the approach of footsteps, Priya was too skilled for that, but the soft, deliberate call of a spotted owlet. 2 notes, then 3, repeated once. The signal they'd agreed upon during previous operations, a sound common enough not to draw attention but distinctive enough to recognize. Arjun responded with the same call, his cupped hands approximating the bird's hollow tone. A moment later, he heard the careful creak of someone ascending the watchtower stairs. Priya Desai emerged onto the platform carrying a large backpack and moving with the economy of someone who'd spent half her life in these forests. She was a small woman, barely reaching Arjun's shoulder, but her frame was wiry with muscle and her dark eyes missed nothing as they swept the platform before settling on him. Then she saw the cub. "Gods!" she breathed, crossing the distance in 3 quick strides. She dropped to her knees beside Arjun, already pulling equipment from her pack. "How long has she been like this?" "Almost 3 hours since I freed her from the snare. She's been deteriorating for the last 40 minutes. Breathing is getting worse, temperature dropping." Arjun's voice was hoarse from exhaustion and dehydration. "I think she's shutting down." Priya's hands moved with practiced efficiency, pulling out a compact veterinary kit that looked military-grade. She had a portable LED lantern, which she set up to illuminate the cub, then began her assessment with the swift confidence of someone who'd done this countless times before. "Pulse is weak, but steady. Respirations at about 40 per minute. Too fast. Gum color." She gently pulled back the cub's lip. "Pale. Definitely in shock." Her fingers probed the bandaged leg carefully. "You did well with the field dressing, but this needs surgical cleaning. There's debris in the wound tract. I can feel it, probably pieces of bark or dirt driven in when the snare tightened." She was already assembling a fluid line, working by feel as much as sight. "Hold her steady. This is going to hurt, and even semi-conscious she might bite." Arjun positioned himself to restrain the cub, his hands firm but gentle on her small body. Priya found the vein in the cub's front leg on the first try, sliding the catheter in with the smoothness of long practice. The cub barely reacted, which worried Arjun more than if she'd fought. It meant she was too far gone to register the pain. "Lactated Ringer's solution," Priya narrated as she worked, connecting the fluid bag to the line. "We need to get her volume up, address the dehydration and shock before we can do anything else." She pulled out a small vial and syringe. "Antibiotics, broad spectrum. And this, another vial, is a mild sedative, enough to take the edge off the pain and keep her calm, but not enough to suppress her breathing further." The medications went in slowly, carefully measured. Then Priya hung the fluid bag from a nail protruding from the watchtower's roof beam and adjusted the drip rate. Now we wait. Give her system time to respond to the fluids before I try to clean that wound. She sat back on her heels, finally allowing herself to look at Arjun properly. Her eyes widened slightly. You look like you fought a tiger. Just her, Arjun gestured at the cub, and a lot of thorn bushes. Priya, what's happening here? How deep does this go? Priya's expression darkened. She pulled out a water bottle from her pack and handed it to him, then took one for herself. They drank in silence for a moment, while the forest night continued its symphony around them. I started noticing things about 6 months ago, she finally said, her voice low. Small inconsistencies, patrol routes that seemed designed to avoid certain sectors, reports of poacher activity that went uninvestigated, equipment that went missing from the armory. She paused, taking another drink. Then I found the ledger. Ledger? Supervisor Malhotra keeps records. Dates, species, weights, prices. He's not just taking bribes to look the other way. He's actively coordinating. He assigns patrol schedules to ensure his crew has clear windows to operate. He provides maps of animal movements based on our camera trap data. He's even been using reserve vehicles to transport products to buyers. Arjun felt a cold fury settling into his chest. How many are involved? At our station, 4 rangers, including Malhotra. But there are connections to other stations too. This is bigger than one corrupt supervisor. There's a network, Arjun, maybe spanning multiple reserves. I've been documenting everything, taking photos of the ledger when I can access his office, recording conversations, but I don't know who to trust at the district level. For all I know, the rot goes up to the regional director. We need to go to the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, federal level, outside the local chain of command. With what evidence? Photos of a ledger I technically obtained illegally. Recordings made without consent. Any lawyer would tear it apart. Priya shook her head. What we need is to catch them in the act. Hard evidence, witnesses, seizures of contraband with clear chain of custody. Arjun looked down at the cub. The fluids were working. Her breathing had already evened out slightly, the desperate shallowness easing towards something more sustainable. She's the evidence, this cub, the snare. Rajan's crew actively hunting in a protected reserve. If we can connect them to it, Priya said. But Rajan is smart. He doesn't carry identification, doesn't use vehicles registered to his name. His crew operates on cash, leaves no paper trail. Even if we arrest them, without proving Malhotra's involvement, the corruption continues. They sat in silence, watching the cub's small chest rise and fall with increasing steadiness. The medication was taking effect now. Her body relaxed slightly, the rigid tension of pain easing into something closer to real sleep. What about the mother? Priya asked softly. It was the question Arjun had been avoiding since the moment he'd found the cub. I haven't seen any sign of her. No tracks nearby, no vocalizations, no territorial marking. Either she was killed or she abandoned the cub. Leopards don't abandon their young unless... Arjun stopped, a terrible understanding dawning. Unless they're too weak to care for them. Priya's eyes met his, and he saw his own realization reflected there. There could be other traps. Set along the mother's hunting routes. She's injured somewhere, dying slowly while her cub... Arjun couldn't finish the thought. We need to find her, Priya said. If we can locate an adult leopard in a trap, document it, photograph it with timestamps and GPS coordinates, that's harder to dismiss. Especially if we can tie it to specific poachers on camera. A stakeout. More than that, a sting operation. Priya leaned forward, her voice taking on intensity. Listen, tomorrow is the full moon. Visibility will be good, and nocturnal animals are more active. Rajan's crew always does their heavy harvesting around the full moon. I've seen the pattern in Malhotra's ledger. They'll be out checking traps, collecting catches. You want to set a trap for the trappers. I have a handheld thermal camera in my locker at the station. We can use it to locate the mother leopard if she's alive, track the poachers' movements, document everything. But we need backup we can trust. Someone outside the local system. Arjun pulled out his phone, checking for signal. 1 bar. I know someone. Vikram Chaudhary at WCCB. We worked together on the Kaziranga trafficking case 2 years ago. He's clean, and he has the authority to mobilize a task force. Can you reach him? Not from here. I'll need to get to higher ground or wait until morning when I can use the station's satellite phone. You can't go to the station. Malhotra will have alerted everyone by now about a possible intruder. They'll be watching for you. Then we need a relay, someone who can carry a message without being suspected. Priya thought for a moment. There's a village kid, Arun, 12 years old, smart as a whip. His father works as a cook at the station. The kid runs errands for us all the time, bringing supplies from the village. No one would think twice about seeing him. Can he be trusted? His uncle was a ranger, killed 3 years ago by poachers during a patrol. The family doesn't talk about it, but I know Arun remembers. Priya's voice softened. He asked me once how to become a ranger when he grows up. Wanted to know if I thought he'd be brave enough. Arjun nodded slowly. Get him a message. Have him ride to the nearest town with a phone signal and call Vikram. Tell him we have an active poaching network and we need a team in place by tomorrow night. Covert insertion, no local notification. And what do we do until then? We keep this little one alive. Arjun gently touched the cub's head, feeling the delicate bones beneath spotted fur. We find her mother if we can, and we prepare to end this. Priya checked the cub's fluid line, then began unpacking the surgical supplies to clean the wound. She's stronger now. I think she can handle the debridement. Hold her steady. For the next 40 minutes, Priya worked with careful precision, cleaning the wound track of debris, flushing it with saline, applying antibiotic ointment, and finally wrapping it in proper bandages. The cub whimpered and squirmed under the sedation, but didn't truly wake. Her system focused on healing rather than consciousness. When Priya finished, she sat back and stripped off her gloves. That's all I can do here. She needs rest, continued fluids, and monitoring, but I think she'll make it through the night. And after that, we fight. Priya's dark eyes hardened with determination. For her mother. For every animal that's died in these forests, because men like Rajan and Malhotra see them as nothing more than commodities. Arjun felt something shift inside him, the fear and exhaustion crystallizing into cold resolve. He thought of the tigress who died in Maharashtra, of her orphaned cubs, of all the creatures he'd tried and failed to save over the years, the losses that accumulated like scars on his soul. But tonight, here in this abandoned watchtower with a sleeping leopard cub and a ranger who refused to accept corruption as inevitable, he allowed himself to feel something he'd kept buried for too long. Hope. Tomorrow then, he said quietly. We end this. Priya nodded, already repacking her kit. I need to get back before the patrol returns. Stay here with her. I'll send Arun with food and water at first light, and with luck, Vikram's team will be in position by sunset tomorrow. She paused at the edge of the platform, looking back. Arjun, what you did today, freeing her, carrying her all this way, that took courage. Don't doubt yourself tomorrow. Don't hesitate. I won't, he promised. Then she was gone, descending into the darkness with the same silent grace she'd arrived with, leaving Arjun alone with the cub and the weight of what was coming. He settled against the wall, the cub warm and breathing steadily in his lap, and watched the moon rise over the forest like a silver witness to all the secrets hidden beneath its ancient canopy. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning, but tonight they would rest. Dawn came slowly to the forest, first as a grey suggestion along the eastern horizon, then spreading like watercolor across the sky until the canopy above glowed with amber light. Arjun hadn't slept. He'd spent the night monitoring the cub's breathing, changing the fluid bag twice, keeping watch over the dark forest below where any sound might signal approaching danger. The cub had stabilized. Her breathing was steady now, her temperature returning to normal as the fluids and antibiotics did their work. She'd even woken once around 3 in the morning, those golden eyes focusing on him with something that might have been recognition before she drifted back into healing sleep. The sound of footsteps on the watchtower stairs brought Arjun fully alert, his hand instinctively moving to shield the cub. But the call came up, the spotted owlet's 2-3 note pattern, and a moment later, a boy's head appeared above the platform edge. Arun was all knobby knees and oversized ears, his thin frame swimming in a faded cricket jersey. But his eyes were sharp and serious beyond his 12 years as he climbed up, carrying a cloth bundle. "Priya Didi sent me," he said in Hindi, his voice barely above a whisper. "Food, water, and medicine for the baby." He set down the bundle, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I called the number she gave me. The man said to tell you, team arriving by helicopter at 14:00 hours, landing zone Echo 3. He said you would know what that means." Arjun's heart leaped. Echo 3 was a clearing on the reserve's northern boundary, used occasionally for emergency medical evacuations. Vikram was bringing a team. It was really happening. "You did well, Arun. Very well." The boy's chest puffed slightly with pride, but his expression remained solemn as he looked at the sleeping cub. "Is she going to live?" "If I have anything to say about it, yes." "Good." Arun's jaw tightened. "They killed a pregnant elephant last year, buried her in a ravine where they thought no one would find her. But I found her. I showed my father, but he said to stay quiet, that it wasn't our business." He looked up at Arjun, and there was old anger in those young eyes. "But it is our business, isn't it? This forest belongs to everyone, to the animals too." "Yes," Arjun said softly. "Yes, it is our business." Arun nodded once, decisively, then began his descent. "I'll tell Priya Didi you got the message. And Sahib, be careful. I heard Malhotraji on the phone this morning. He was angry, very angry." After the boy left, Arjun unwrapped the bundle. Chapatis, hard-boiled eggs, bananas, simple food that tasted like a feast after his 20-hour ordeal. There was also a thermos of sweet tea that he drank gratefully, feeling warmth and energy spreading through his exhausted body. More importantly, there was fresh bandaging material, another bag of IV fluids, and a handwritten note from Priya. "Found fresh tracks near Sector 6 watering hole. Large female leopard, dragging left rear leg, moving northwest toward the old logging road. She's alive. PD." Arjun closed his eyes, relief washing over him. The mother was alive, injured, but alive and still mobile enough to hunt. That meant there was still hope for reuniting her with her cub, still a chance this story could have a happy ending. But first, they had to survive the next 12 hours. The cub woke around mid-morning, more alert now than she'd been since the trap. She looked at Arjun with clearer eyes, taking in his scent, his appearance, perhaps beginning to understand that this strange bipedal creature had saved her life. When he offered her water in his cupped palm, she drank without hesitation. He tried her with small pieces of boiled egg, mashing them into a paste. She sniffed suspiciously, turned away twice, but hunger eventually overcame caution. She licked tentatively at the food, then with more enthusiasm, her small pink tongue rasping against his fingers. "That's it," Arjun encouraged softly. "You need your strength. You're going to see your mother again. I promise you that." It was a promise he had no right to make, but he made it anyway. At 13:30, Arjun heard the distant thump of helicopter rotors. The sound grew steadily louder, then faded toward the north as the aircraft settled somewhere beyond the tree line. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text. "In position, where are you?" "VC." Arjun sent his coordinates and a brief situation summary. Within 10 minutes, he heard movement below. Professionals this time, not trying to be silent but moving with tactical efficiency. 4 figures in civilian clothing emerged from the forest and climbed the watchtower. Vikram Chaudhary was in his late 40s, grey threading through his black hair, his face weathered by decades of fieldwork. Behind him came 3 younger officers, 2 men and a woman, all carrying equipment packs and wearing expressions of focused intensity. Arjun. Vikram clasped his hand firmly, then looked at the cub. His expression softened. So this is what all the urgency is about. She's beautiful. She's evidence, Arjun said, of an active poaching network operating inside this reserve with official cooperation. Priya Desai briefed me on the phone. We've been watching Sector Supervisor Malhotra for 3 months now as part of a larger investigation. This could be the break we need. Vikram knelt beside the cub, observing but not touching. How is she? Stable. The leg will heal, though she may have a slight limp. But she can't survive without her mother. She's too young to hunt, too young to establish territory. She needs to be reunited. Priya mentioned the mother was tracked. Do you think she's still in the area? Leopards don't abandon their cubs unless forced to. She's injured, probably caught in another trap that she managed to escape from. But she'll be searching for her baby, driven by instincts stronger than pain or fear. Vikram nodded thoughtfully. Then we use the cub as bait. Arjun's protective instinct flared immediately. No, absolutely not. She's been through enough. Not real bait, Arjun. Think about it. If we can track the mother to one of the poachers' trap lines, if we can position ourselves to catch them in the act of checking their traps and finding an adult leopard, Vikram's eyes glinted with strategic calculation. We document everything. The traps, the captured animal, the poachers' identities, their methods. Then we arrest them with incontrovertible evidence, and we make sure the right people see that evidence, people who can't be bought or intimidated. One of the younger officers, a woman with sharp features and alert eyes, spoke up. We have drone surveillance, thermal imaging, and audio recording equipment. We can cover a wide area without being detected. If Ranger Desai can guide us to the trap lines she suspects, we set up observation posts and wait. The full moon is tonight, another officer added. Poachers love full moons, good visibility, animals more active. If this crew operates on a schedule like you suspect, they'll be out checking their traps. Arjun looked down at the cub, who had curled up against his leg, her small body trusting and vulnerable. The thought of using her, even indirectly, made his stomach clench. But Vikram was right. This wasn't just about saving one leopard cub anymore. It was about stopping a network that had killed dozens, maybe hundreds of animals over the years. What's the plan? He asked quietly. Vikram spread a topographic map across the platform floor. Priya marked these locations. He indicated several red X's as probable trap sites based on her observations. They form a rough perimeter around a central area here, near the old logging road. That's probably their collection point, where they process and store catches before transport. How many poachers are we expecting? Arjun asked. Priya identified 4 active crew members, plus Rajan as the leader, but there could be more. We're prepared for up to 8 hostiles. Armed? We have to assume yes, probably hunting rifles, maybe handguns. We're authorized to carry firearms, but rules of engagement are strict. Defensive use only unless lives are in immediate danger. Vikram looked at each of his team members, then at Arjun. This is volunteer only. Anyone uncomfortable with the risks can stay with the helicopter. No one moved. Good. Then here's how this works. Vikram began outlining the operation with military precision. By 17, they were in position. Arjun had insisted on joining the operation despite Vikram's protests, leaving the cub with the helicopter pilot and a medic who had veterinary training. The cub had cried when he left, a sound that tore at his heart, but she was safe, and that was what mattered. Now he lay on his stomach in dense undergrowth 50 meters from the old logging road, Priya beside him, and Vikram's team spread out in a loose perimeter covering 3 probable trap sites. Each team had thermal imaging, cameras, and communication equipment. They'd already located 2 active traps, one holding a struggling chital deer, another empty but recently triggered, and they'd found the mother leopard. She was caught in a snare similar to the one that had trapped her cub, her left rear leg twisted in wire that had bitten deep into muscle. But unlike her cub, the adult leopard had fought. The vegetation around her was destroyed, torn and trampled in a circle of fury. The wire was anchored to a tree trunk, too large to uproot, but the leopard had tried anyway, tried until exhaustion and blood loss had forced her to stillness. Now she lay panting in the fading light, her golden coat matted with blood and dirt, her eyes dull with pain, but still defiant, still alive. "Can we free her before the poachers arrive?" Arjun whispered into his radio. "Negative," Vikram's voice crackled back. "Too risky. An injured adult leopard is exponentially more dangerous than a cub. She'd kill you before you got close enough to help. And if we tranquilize her now, we lose our evidence. We need the poachers to reveal themselves." It was the right tactical decision. Arjun knew that intellectually. But watching the mother leopards suffer while they hid and waited felt like moral cowardice. "Vehicle approaching," Priya murmured beside him. "Northern access road." Through his binoculars, Arjun saw headlights cutting through the dusky forest. A battered pickup truck, no license plates visible, windows tinted dark. It pulled to a stop near the logging road, and 4 men climbed out. Rajan was immediately recognizable from Priya's descriptions. Tall, heavy-set, moving with the confident swagger of someone who'd operated with impunity for years. The others were younger, harder, carrying rifles and large knives openly. "All units, target acquired." Vikram's voice was calm in Arjun's earpiece. "Do not engage until my command. Remember, we need them to incriminate themselves. Get evidence first." The poachers moved with practiced efficiency, splitting into pairs to check different trap lines. Rajan and another man headed directly toward the mother leopard's position. Arjun's hands tightened into fists. Beside him, he felt Priya tense, her breath coming faster. They were close enough now to hear the men's voices. "Big female," Rajan was saying, satisfaction evident in his tone. "Probably 15, 16 kilograms. Pelt alone is worth 70,000 rupees to the right buyer." "What about the meat?" "Bones go to the traditional medicine contacts. Meat will dump, no market for it." Rajan laughed, a sound without humor. "Too bad we lost that cub yesterday. Small pelts are popular for tourist trinkets." Evidence. Clear, unambiguous evidence of intent to poach and sell protected species. The mother leopard had seen them now. She tried to rise, to flee or fight, but the snare held her fast. A low growl rumbled from her chest, primal and threatening despite her weakened state. "Still has some fight," Rajan's companion noted. "Should we shoot her now?" "No. Bullet holes decrease the value. We use the catchpole, tighten the noose around her neck until she loses consciousness. Then we bleed her. Cleaner. Better product." They were pulling equipment from their bags now. A long pole with a wire noose at one end. A large knife. Plastic tarps. Arjun's vision tunneled. The rage that had been building since he'd found the trapped cub, since he'd learned about Malhotra's corruption, since he'd spent 7 years watching animals die because of human greed. It all crystallized into a single burning point of fury. He started to move forward, but Priya's hand clamped on his arm like a vice. "Wait," she breathed. "Not yet. We need to wait for Vikram's signal. They're going to kill her. And if we move now, the others will escape. We have to trust the plan." Every second felt like an eternity. Rajan was approaching the leopard now, the catchpole extended. The mother leopard snarled, showing fangs that could crush bone, but she was trapped, and they both knew it. Then Vikram's voice crackled over the radio. "All units on my mark, 3, 2, 1, execute." What happened next was controlled chaos. High-intensity spotlights blazed to life from 4 positions, turning twilight into artificial day and freezing the poachers like deer in headlights. Vikram's team emerged from cover, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, get on the ground, now! Hands where we can see them!" 2 of the poachers immediately dropped their weapons and complied. But Rajan and his companion near the leopard reacted differently. Rajan grabbed for his rifle, while his partner lunged toward the leopard with the catchpole. Whether to finish the job quickly or take a hostage, Arjun would never know. Because Arjun was already moving, he burst from cover, sprinting across the 50 meters of open ground with no thought for his safety, no plan beyond stopping that pole from reaching the leopard's neck. He hit Rajan's companion in a flying tackle that sent them both crashing into the undergrowth, the catchpole flying from numb hands. Behind him, he heard Priya shouting, heard the sharp crack of a rifle shot, heard Vikram yelling commands. But his focus had narrowed to the man beneath him who was reaching for a knife at his belt. Arjun caught the wrist, slammed it twice against a rock until fingers opened and the knife fell away. The man bucked and thrashed, trying to throw him off, but adrenaline gave Arjun strength he didn't know he possessed. He pinned the man's arms, pressed a knee into his chest, and held on while chaos raged around them. When strong hands finally pulled him off, Arjun found himself looking up at one of Vikram's officers. The young woman was securing zip-tie restraints on the poacher's wrists, her expression professionally neutral despite the adrenaline clearly pumping through her system. "Clear," she said into her radio. "Subject secured." Arjun rolled to his feet, his entire body shaking. The clearing was now brilliantly lit by portable floodlights that Vikram's team had set up. 3 poachers lay face down on the ground, hands restrained behind their backs. But where was Rajan? "There!" Priya's shout cut through the confusion. She was pointing toward the northern tree line, where a figure was crashing through the undergrowth, fleeing into darkness. Vikram spoke rapid commands into his radio. "Akash, circle north and cut him off. Mira, stay with the prisoners. Arjun, Priya, with me." They plunged into the forest in pursuit. Vikram in the lead with a powerful flashlight cutting swaths through the darkness. Arjun's legs burned, his scratched and battered body protesting every movement, but he pushed forward on pure determination. Rajan was faster than his bulk suggested, navigating the difficult terrain with the ease of intimate familiarity. But he was running blind into territory that Vikram's team had already mapped and secured. Within 3 minutes, he burst into a small clearing and found himself facing Akash, the youngest of Vikram's officers, who stood with weapon drawn and expression absolutely calm. "End of the line," Akash said quietly. Rajan skidded to a stop, spun around to find Vikram, Priya and Arjun blocking his retreat. His chest heaved with exertion, sweat streaming down his face, eyes darting like a cornered animal searching for escape routes that didn't exist. "You're making a mistake," Rajan said, his voice taking on a conciliatory tone. "Do you know who I work for? Who protects my operations? You can't touch me." "Supervisor Malhotra?" Vikram's voice was cold. "He's being arrested as we speak by a federal team at the patrol station, along with 3 rangers on his payroll. We've had surveillance on all of you for months. This was just the final piece we needed." The color drained from Rajan's face. "You can't prove anything. We have recordings of you discussing the sale of protected species. We have photographs of you with poaching equipment and a trapped endangered leopard. We have testimony from witnesses and a ledger documenting your entire operation." Vikram stepped closer. "But most importantly, we have 4 officers who just watched you attempt to kill a federally protected animal. So turn around, put your hands behind your back, and maybe the judge will show you mercy." For a moment, Rajan stood frozen, calculations flickering behind his eyes. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. He turned slowly and allowed Akash to secure his wrists. "She's going to die anyway," Rajan said, as they led him back toward the clearing, a last petty cruelty. "That leopard, the infection from the snare will kill her in a few days. All this for nothing." "Shut up," Priya said flatly. When they returned to the logging road, Vikram's team had the situation fully under control. The 4 poachers sat in a line with their backs against the truck, ankles bound, heads down. Mira was photographing everything. The traps, the equipment, the vehicle, creating an incontrovertible record. But Arjun's attention went immediately to the mother leopard. She was still caught in the snare, but her golden eyes tracked the movement around her with fierce intelligence. She was panting heavily, her body trembling with exhaustion and pain, but alive, still magnificently, defiantly alive. "Vikram," Arjun said urgently, "I need to free her, now, before shock sets in further." "How?" "She'll attack the moment you get close. Tranquilizer dart. I can calculate the dosage based on her estimated weight. Then we have about 10 minutes to free her from the snare, clean the wound, and administer antibiotics before she wakes up. And then what? She can't hunt with that leg, can't defend territory, she'll starve." "No," Arjun said firmly. "She'll heal. Leopards are remarkably resilient. And more importantly," his voice caught slightly, "she has a cub waiting for her. A reason to survive." Vikram studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it. What do you need?" "The veterinary kit from the helicopter, the tranquilizer rifle, and someone to help me work fast once she's down." "I'll help," Priya said immediately. Within 20 minutes, the medical kit had arrived. Arjun prepared the tranquilizer dart with hands that had steadied now that he had a clear purpose. He loaded it into the rifle, took careful aim at the leopard's hindquarters where the drug would absorb quickly into muscle tissue, and fired. The leopard flinched as the dart struck, let out a low growl, then slowly, her eyes began to glaze. Her head lowered, her breathing deepened. After 4 minutes, she was fully unconscious. Arjun and Priya moved quickly. The snare had cut deep, creating a wound similar to the cub's but worse. Older, more infected, with the wire embedded in swollen tissue. Arjun worked with the focused intensity he'd learned in 7 years of emergency veterinary medicine, cutting away the wire, debriding dead tissue, flushing the wound with saline and antibiotics. Priya assisted with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, anticipating his needs, handing him instruments before he asked, maintaining steady pressure on bleeding points. "She's approximately 40 kilograms, Arjun narrated as he worked, partly for his own focus and partly for the record. "The snare has caused significant soft tissue damage, but no apparent bone fracture. Wound is approximately 8 days old, based on infection stage. Without treatment, she would have died within another 3 to 5 days from sepsis." He administered a massive dose of broad-spectrum antibiotics, added anti-inflammatory medication, wrapped the leg in professional bandaging that would allow movement while protecting the wound. The entire process took 37 minutes. When he finally sat back, exhausted, his hands were covered in blood and his body was shaking again with depleted adrenaline. But the leopard was breathing steadily, her leg properly treated, her chances of survival dramatically improved. "She'll wake in about 2 hours, Arjun said quietly, disoriented at first, probably in pain, but alive. Vikram had been documenting everything with a video camera. Now he lowered it and met Arjun's eyes. "You know we can't stay here when she wakes. An adult leopard coming out of sedation in the presence of humans is extremely dangerous." "I know. And you can't guarantee she'll survive, or that she'll accept the cub back. Sometimes mothers reject young that have been handled by humans or separated for too long." "I know that too." Arjun looked at the unconscious leopard, at the rise and fall of her powerful chest, at the scars marking her body from years of survival in these forests. "But we have to try. She deserves that chance. They both do." Priya was already packing up the medical supplies. "The cub is still at the helicopter, about 2 kilometers from here. If we bring her to this location and withdraw before the mother wakes, there's a chance. A slim one, but a chance." "It's risky," Vikram said. "The cub is evidence. We need her for the prosecution. You have photographs, video. You have 4 poachers caught in the act. You have Malhotra and his crew in custody." Arjun's voice was hard. "You have more than enough evidence. This cub deserves to be wild, to live the life she was meant for, not locked in a rescue facility as a prosecution exhibit." Vikram was silent for a long moment, staring at the mother leopard. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "My daughter wants to be a veterinarian. She's 15 now, applying to universities. She asked me once why I do this job, why I risk my life for animals when humans need help too. He looked at Arjun. I told her that protecting wildlife isn't separate from protecting people. It's about preserving the world we want to leave behind, about choosing what kind of species we want to be. He pulled out his radio. All units, we're implementing reunion protocol. Bring the cub to these coordinates. Move quickly and quietly. We need to be clear of the area before the adult wakes. The cub arrived 20 minutes later, carried carefully by the helicopter pilot. She was more alert now, looking around with bright, curious eyes, her injured leg bearing weight tentatively. When Arjun took her, she recognized him immediately, pressed her small head against his chest, purring with a sound like distant thunder. "Okay, little one," he whispered. "Time to go home." He carried her to within 5 meters of her mother, close enough for the adult scent to surround them, close enough that when the mother woke, she would immediately see her cub. He set the small leopard down gently on soft moss and stepped back. The cub looked confused at first, glancing back at Arjun as if asking permission. Then her nose caught something, a scent, a memory, recognition wired into her DNA. She took a tentative step toward the unconscious adult, then another. Then she was moving as fast as her injured leg would allow, limping to her mother's side with small, desperate cries. She curled against the adult leopard's belly, exactly as she would have done in their den, and began to nurse. Even unconscious, the mother's body responded, a front leg moving instinctively to curl around her cub, drawing her close. Arjun felt tears on his cheeks and didn't bother to wipe them away. "We need to go," Vikram said quietly. "Now, while they're both still calm." The team withdrew in silence, moving through the dark forest with careful stealth. Behind them, in the pool of moonlight breaking through the canopy, a mother and cub lay together, two spotted bodies intertwined, breathing in synchrony. When they were 500 meters away, and behind a ridge that would block line of sight, they stopped. Vikram set up a camera with a telephoto lens on a tripod, aimed back at the clearing. The thermal imaging would allow them to monitor from a distance without disturbing the animals. "Now we wait," he said, "and we hope." Arjun settled on the ground, suddenly aware of every injury, every exhausted muscle, every hour of the past day catching up with him. Priya sat beside him, handing him a water bottle he drained in seconds. The poachers had been transported to the helicopter, which had relocated to a secure area. Malhotra and his crew were in federal custody. The evidence was documented and preserved. By any objective measure, the operation had been a complete success. But success would only be real if those two leopards survived the night, if the mother accepted her cub, if the wild allowed them one more chance. Arjun stared at the camera monitor, watching the thermal images of two warm bodies pressed together in the darkness, and sent up another prayer to gods he wasn't sure he believed in. "Please, let this work. Let them both live." The forest held its breath and waited for dawn. The mother leopard stirred first as the sedative began to wear off. On the thermal monitor, Arjun watched her heat signature shift, limbs moving sluggishly as consciousness returned. He held his breath, aware that Vikram and the entire team had gone completely silent around him. This moment would determine everything. The adult leopard's head lifted slowly, confusion evident in her movements as she tried to orient herself. Then she felt the small, warm body pressed against her belly, heard the soft purring sound of her cub, and something fundamental clicked into place. Even through the grainy thermal imaging, they could see the transformation. The mother's entire body relaxed, curling more tightly around her cub in a protective embrace. Her head lowered to sniff the small spotted form, tongue rasping across the cub's head in long grooming strokes. The cub responded with enthusiastic squeaks, kneading tiny paws against her mother's belly, pressing closer. "She remembers," Priya whispered, wonder in her voice. "She knows her baby." The mother leopard tried to stand then, perhaps instinctively wanting to move her cub to safer ground, away from this exposed clearing where danger had found them. But her injured leg buckled, sending her back down with what looked like a grunt of frustration. The cub immediately moved to the injured leg, sniffing at the bandages with obvious concern. Then, in a gesture so human it made Arjun's chest ache, the small leopard began licking her mother's face, offering comfort the only way she knew how. The mother accepted this for a long moment, then gently but firmly pushed the cub away with her nose. She tried standing again, more carefully this time, keeping the injured leg mostly off the ground. It held. She took a tentative step, then another, testing her limits. The cub stayed close, matching her mother's pace, instinctively positioning herself on the side of the good leg, where she wouldn't interfere with balance. Together, mother and cub began moving slowly away from the clearing, heading deeper into the forest. The mother paused every few steps to rest, but she kept moving with stubborn determination, her cub never more than a body length away. "They're going to make it," Vikram said quietly. "Look at her. She's wounded, recovering from sedation, exhausted, but she's still moving, still protecting her young. That's a survivor." Arjun nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He watched the thermal signatures until they disappeared into the dense forest. 2 spots of warmth, swallowed by the vast darkness of the reserve. Only when they were completely gone did he allow himself to collapse backward onto the ground, staring up at the canopy where dawn was beginning to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. "You did it," Priya said, settling beside him. "Against all odds, you actually did it." "We did it," Arjun corrected. "You, me, Vikram's team, young Arun, even that helicopter pilot who knew just how to hold a frightened leopard cub." He closed his eyes, feeling the cool morning air on his face. And them, that mother who refused to give up, who dragged herself through this forest on 3 legs looking for her baby, that cub who survived and fought when any creature that small should have simply died. Vikram was already on his satellite phone, reporting to headquarters. His voice carried across the clearing. Successful intervention, both animals stable and reunited. 4 suspects in custody, plus Supervisor Malhotra and 3 rangers. Evidence secured. Request immediate review of all personnel assignments in this sector. The sun continued its rise, burning away the mist that clung to the forest floor. Birds began their morning chorus. Langur monkeys called territories from distant trees. And somewhere not far away, a sambar deer barked its alarm at some perceived threat. Life continuing. The forest breathing and moving and existing as it had for millennia, indifferent to human drama, but shaped by human choices nonetheless. They returned to the patrol station as the morning heat began building. The place had been transformed overnight into a crime scene. Federal officers moving through offices with boxes of evidence, computers being seized, filing cabinets emptied. Malhotra sat in handcuffs in what had been his own office, his face ashen, all the swagger and authority stripped away. He looked up when Arjun passed the doorway, and something like desperation flickered across his features. "It was just business," he said hoarsely. "Just trying to make enough to give my family a better life. You understand that, don't you? A man has to provide—" "Don't!" Arjun cut him off, his voice harder than he'd ever heard it. "Don't you dare justify this. Those animals you killed, you sold. They were just trying to survive, to provide for their own families. That leopard cub almost died because you wanted money. Her mother almost died. Dozens, maybe hundreds of creatures have died because of your choices. They're just animals. They're living beings, with as much right to this world as you or I. More right, maybe, because they were here first, because they don't take more than they need, because they don't destroy everything they touch out of greed." Arjun leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion making him reckless with honesty. "You want to know the difference between you and that mother leopard? She would have died protecting her cub. You sold yours for rupees." He walked away before Malhotra could respond, feeling Priya's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Easy," she murmured. "He's not worth your anger." "Maybe not, But those leopards were worth everything we did, worth every risk, every moment of fear. Arjun looked at her. What happens to you now? This station, your position here? Vikram offered me a transfer to his team. Federal-level anti-poaching task force. Better pay, better support, and most importantly, she smiled slightly, no corrupt supervisors. Her expression sobered. But I'll miss these forests. I've been here 6 years. I know every trail, every watering hole, every den site. The leopards will miss you too, especially a certain mother and cub who owe you their lives. Priya shook her head. They don't owe us anything. If anything, we owe them an apology for the world we've created where mothers and cubs can't simply exist without fear of human greed, for the fact that saving them required this much effort, this much risk. She looked out the window at the forest beyond. We shouldn't have to fight this hard just to let wild things be wild. No, Arjun agreed quietly. We shouldn't. But until the world changes, we fight anyway. 3 days later, Arjun returned to the granite outcrop with fresh supplies and a high-powered camera. He'd barely slept since the rescue, his body demanding rest his mind refused to allow. He kept seeing that cub's golden eyes, kept replaying the moment of reunion, kept wondering if they'd truly survived. He set up the camera on the outcrop's peak, aimed toward the sector where the leopards had disappeared. Then he settled in to wait, prepared to spend days if necessary. It took only 4 hours. The mother appeared first, emerging from dense bamboo with her distinctive limping gait. But the limp was less pronounced now, healing happening with the miraculous speed of wild creatures when given a chance. She moved to a sunny rock and settled down, head raised, eyes scanning her territory with calm vigilance. A moment later, the cub bounded out of the same bamboo thicket, all ungainly legs and youthful enthusiasm. Her injured leg still bore bandaging. The mother had been smart enough not to tear it off, but it clearly pained her less. She pounced on her mother's twitching tail, wrestled with it briefly, then clambered up onto the rock to curl against the adult's warm flank. Through his camera lens, Arjun could see the cub's face clearly. The fear and pain that had marked their first encounter were gone, replaced by the simple contentment of a young creature with a full belly and a mother's protection. She looked like what she was supposed to be, wild, healthy, free. Arjun took photograph after photograph, documenting their survival, their recovery, their return to normalcy. But more than that, he simply watched. Watched the mother groom her cub with patient thoroughness, watched the cub play and explore while her mother kept vigilant guard. Watched them nap together in the afternoon sun, 2 spotted forms so perfectly camouflaged against the dappled rock that they seemed to disappear and reappear with the shifting light. This was what he'd been fighting for through 7 years of exhausting, heartbreaking work. Not the dramatic rescues or the arrests or the headlines. This, the quiet continuation of wildlife. The simple miracle of creatures existing as they were meant to exist. His phone buzzed with a message from Vikram. Trial date set. They want you to testify. Also, DNA from the cub match genetic database. Her mother is a known individual designated F-17, first documented in this reserve 8 years ago, has successfully raised 3 previous litters. You saved a prolific breeding female. That cub might have cubs of her own someday. Well done. Arjun read the message 3 times, feeling something shift inside his chest. F-17. She had a designation, a history, documented offspring contributing to the genetic diversity of her species. She mattered not just as an individual life, but as a thread in the larger tapestry of leopard conservation. And her cub, this small spotted creature, currently wrestling with her mother's ear, she would carry that legacy forward, would grow into an adult, establish her own territory, raise her own young. The genes that made her resilient enough to survive a poacher's trap, the instincts that had kept her alive when she should have died, all of it would pass to future generations. One rescue had rippled outward into dozens, maybe hundreds of lives saved across decades. Arjun lowered his camera and simply sat, watching mother and cub through the afternoon heat until they rose and melted back into the forest. He waited another hour, hoping for one more glimpse, but they'd moved on to wherever leopards go when humans aren't watching. Good, he thought. That's exactly right. Be invisible, be ghosts, survive. He packed his equipment as the sun began its descent and started the long walk back to his vehicle. His body still ached from accumulated injuries, and he knew it would be weeks before the scratches and bruises fully healed. Physical scars from a battle won. But the scars that mattered most weren't visible. They were the ones carved into his soul by every animal he'd failed to save, every creature that had died despite his best efforts. The tigress in Maharashtra and her orphaned cubs, the elephant Arun had found in a ravine, countless others across 7 years of work in the field. Those scars would never fully heal, but maybe that was okay. Maybe they were supposed to stay tender, supposed to remind him why this work mattered, why giving up was never an option. Because for every animal lost, there could be one saved. For every tragedy, there could be a triumph. For every Malhotra corrupted by greed, there could be a Priya standing firm in integrity. The balance was precarious, the victories small and hard-won, the defeats crushing. But the alternative was surrender, and Arjun Mehta had never learned how to do that. He reached his jeep as twilight descended, casting long shadows through the forest. Before climbing in, he turned back one last time toward the granite outcrop, toward the forests beyond, where a mother leopard and her cub were settling in for the night. "Thank you," he whispered to them, to the forest, to whatever force had allowed their survival. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for being exactly what this world needs you to be." The forest whispered back with wind through leaves and the first calls of nightjars, a language older than words, speaking of cycles and seasons and the stubborn persistence of life against all odds. Arjun climbed into his jeep and started the engine, already thinking about his next assignment, the next animal that would need saving, the next battle in an endless war. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he allowed himself to feel something dangerous and fragile and necessary: hope. 6 months later, Arjun returned to the reserve. The monsoon had come and gone, transforming the landscape into an explosion of green. The streams ran full and clear, waterfalls cascaded down rocky slopes, and the forest hummed with the dense vitality that only the rains could bring. Everything felt renewed, reborn, washed clean of the dry season's dust and heat. He wasn't alone this time. Vikram had come with him, along with Priya, who was visiting her old territory before her permanent transfer to the federal task force. And there was one more person, a journalist from a national wildlife magazine who wanted to document the story, to share what had happened here with a wider audience. "Do you think we'll see them?" the journalist asked as they hiked toward the granite outcrop. Her name was Kavita, a woman in her 30s with intelligent eyes and a camera always ready in her hands. "Maybe," Arjun said. "Leopards are elusive even in the best circumstances. But F-17 has been documented in this sector regularly over the past 6 months. The camera traps have captured her dozens of times, and her cub is with her in almost every image. They'd reviewed those images together that morning at the research station, a new facility that had been established in the wake of Malhotra's arrest, staffed by scientists and rangers whose integrity had been thoroughly vetted. The photographs told a story of recovery and survival that still moved Arjun even after seeing them countless times. F-17's leg had healed remarkably well. She moved with only the slightest limp now, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. More importantly, she was hunting successfully, teaching her cub the skills that would one day make her independent. The cub, Arjun had privately named her Asha, Hope, in Hindi, though he'd never spoken the name aloud, had grown substantially. At 11 months old, she was lanky and awkward, caught in that adolescent stage between cub and adult. But she was healthy, curious, and learning fast. The camera traps had captured her practicing stalking techniques on butterflies, pouncing on fallen leaves, mock fighting with her infinitely patient mother. She still bore a scar on her hind leg where the snare had cut deep. She always would. But she ran without visible pain, climbed trees with agility, and showed every sign of developing into a successful predator. The physical scar would remain, but it hadn't broken her. They reached the outcrop in late afternoon, the golden hour when light turned everything luminous. Arjun set up his camera equipment while Kavita prepared her own gear, and Priya and Vikram settled in to wait with the patient stillness of people who'd spent careers observing wildlife. The trial concluded last week, Vikram said quietly as they watched the forest below. Final sentencing. Malhotra got 7 years, Rajan got 10. The others got various terms between 3 and 6 years. More importantly, the investigation expanded based on evidence we gathered. We've made 17 additional arrests across 3 states, shut down a trafficking network that had been operating for over a decade. How many animals? Arjun asked. We'll never know for certain. Hundreds, probably. Tigers, leopards, elephants, pangolins, deer, birds, anything with commercial value. Vikram's jaw tightened. But that network is gone now, and the publicity from this case has led to policy changes. Increased funding for anti-poaching units, stronger penalties for wildlife crimes, better training for forest staff. 1 leopard cub, Priya said softly. That's what started all of this. 1 small life that refused to give up, and 1 man who refused to walk away. It wasn't just me, Arjun protested. It was all of us. It was Arun running through the night to make a phone call. It was you gathering evidence at personal risk. It was Vikram bringing resources and authority. It was you, Priya interrupted firmly. You were the one who heard her cry and ran toward danger instead of away from it. You were the one who carried her for kilometers with poachers hunting you. You were the one who promised her she'd see her mother again and refused to accept any other outcome. Don't diminish that. Arjun didn't know how to respond, so he said nothing. He thought about that moment in the clearing when he'd first seen the trapped cub, the choice he'd made in a split second to intervene. It had felt inevitable at the time, not heroic. Just the only possible response to suffering when you had the ability to ease it. Wasn't that what being human was supposed to mean? Not dominion over other species, but responsibility toward them. Not conquest, but coexistence. Not taking, but protecting. Movement below caught his attention. He raised his binoculars, heart suddenly pounding, and there, emerging from dense vegetation near the stream, was F-17. She looked magnificent. Her coat gleamed with health, muscles rippling beneath spotted fur as she moved to the water's edge to drink. The limp was barely perceptible now, just a slight hesitation in her gait that you'd miss if you blinked. She drank deeply, head raised periodically to scan for threats, every inch the apex predator she'd been born to be. And behind her, moving with increasing confidence and grace, came Asha. The young leopard was nearly 2/3 her mother's size now, her spots beginning to take on the defined rosette patterns of adulthood. She mimicked her mother's drinking technique, lapping water while staying alert, already learning the constant vigilance that wildlife demanded. Kavita was photographing rapidly, her camera's shutter creating a soft, clicking rhythm. But Arjun barely noticed. He was transfixed by the simple beauty of what he was witnessing. 2 leopards existing in their natural habitat, doing what leopards had done for millions of years, drinking, resting, preparing for the night's hunt, alive, wild, free. F-17 finished drinking and moved to a flat rock where afternoon sun pooled warm and golden. She settled down, body relaxed but senses alert. Asha climbed up beside her, and for a moment Arjun was transported back 6 months to another rock, another afternoon, when he'd first photographed them together after the rescue. But this was different. Asha was larger now, more independent. She didn't curl against her mother's side like she once had. Instead, she sprawled beside her, their bodies touching but separate, a perfect metaphor for the growing distance that would eventually lead to independence. Someday soon, probably within the next few months, Asha would leave. She'd establish her own territory, carve out her own place in these forests. She'd hunt alone, face dangers alone, survive alone. That was the way of leopards, the price and gift of independence. But she'd carry everything her mother had taught her, the hunting skills, the territory awareness, the survival instincts. And someday, if she was lucky and strong and the forest was kind, she'd have cubs of her own. She'd pass on those lessons to a new generation, an unbroken chain stretching backward to the first leopards and forward to an unknowable future. That was the true measure of success, Arjun realized. Not the rescue itself, but what came after. The ripples spreading outward through time and space, one life touching others, creating possibilities that would have otherwise ceased to exist. "She's looking at us," Priya whispered. Arjun focused his binoculars and saw that she was right. F-17 had noticed their presence on the outcrop, her golden eyes fixed on their position with the unwavering intensity of a leopard's stare. They were far enough away not to be threatening, but close enough to be acknowledged. For a long moment, woman and leopard regarded each other across the distance. Then F-17 did something unexpected. She blinked, slow and deliberate. The gesture cats used to signal contentment, trust, peaceful intent. Arjun's breath caught. He'd seen that gesture from the cub, when he'd held her in the watchtower, but never from a wild adult leopard, never directed at a human who the leopard had every reason to fear and hate. Did she remember him? Could she possibly recognize the scent, the shape, the presence of the human who'd freed her cub and treated her wounds? Or was this simply a moment of understanding between two beings who'd both fought to survive, who'd both refused to surrender? He'd never know for certain. That was part of the mystery and magic of wild creatures. They kept their thoughts and motivations hidden, gave only glimpses into their inner worlds. But in that moment, Arjun chose to believe she remembered, chose to believe she understood, in whatever way a leopard could understand, that not all humans were enemies, that some were allies in the great struggle of life against death, survival against extinction, hope against despair. F-17 turned away first, grooming Asha's head with long licks of her rough tongue. The cub tolerated this for a moment, then squirmed away to investigate something in the rocks. A lizard, perhaps, or an interesting smell. She pounced with exaggerated intensity, missed whatever she was hunting, and tumbled in an ungainly heap that made Kavita laugh softly behind her camera. The afternoon stretched toward evening. The leopards remained on their rock, resting and playing, occasionally grooming each other, existing in that timeless way wild animals had. No past to regret, no future to fear, only the present moment stretching out in all its complexity and simplicity. As the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, F-17 rose and stretched with feline grace. Asha immediately scrambled to her feet, alert and ready. Mother and cub touched noses briefly, a gesture of affection and communication, then began moving into the deeper forest. They paused at the tree line, both turning back one last time. Two pairs of golden eyes reflecting the dying light, two spotted forms poised between visibility and invisibility, presence and absence. Then they were gone, melted into shadows and green darkness, returned to the secret world where humans were only occasional intruders. Arjun lowered his binoculars, feeling something fundamental settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or completion. The knowledge that the story that had begun in terror and desperation had found its proper ending, which was really a beginning, a continuation, an affirmation that life persists. "That was extraordinary," Kavita said, her voice hushed with awe. "The photographs I got, people need to see this, need to understand what you saved, what you protected." "What we all protected," Arjun corrected. He looked at Vikram and Priya, at these colleagues who'd become friends, bound together by shared purpose and hard-won victory. And what continues to need protecting? This isn't over. It's never over. For every Malhotra we arrest, there's someone else willing to profit from wildlife crime. For every animal we save, there are dozens we lose. But we keep fighting anyway, Priya said. It wasn't a question. We keep fighting, Arjun agreed. Because the alternative is unacceptable. Because those leopards deserve to exist. Because every wild creature has intrinsic value beyond what humans can extract from them. Because, he paused, searching for the right words, because hope is a choice we make. Every day, in the face of all evidence that we're losing, we choose to keep hoping, keep trying, keep believing that things can be different. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding red and gold across the sky. In the forests below, night creatures were beginning to wake. Owls called, deer moved toward water, and somewhere in the darkness, a mother leopard was teaching her daughter how to hunt, how to survive, how to be wild. Life continuing its eternal dance, indifferent to human observation, but shaped by human choice. Arjun thought of all the animals he'd tried to save over 7 years, the ones who'd died despite his efforts, and the ones who'd lived because of them. Each life a thread, in an enormous tapestry he could only glimpse fragments of, a pattern too vast and complex to fully comprehend. But he understood this. Every thread mattered. Every life had weight and consequence. Every choice to help or harm rippled outward in ways that couldn't be predicted or measured. He'd saved one leopard cub because he couldn't do otherwise. And in doing so, he'd helped save her mother, disrupted a criminal network, inspired policy changes, and perhaps, just perhaps, given hope to others who fought similar battles in different forests, different countries, different contexts. One small act of compassion had become something larger than he could have imagined. That was worth remembering, worth fighting for, worth carrying forward into whatever came next. The stars were emerging now, bright points in the darkening sky. Arjun looked up at them, at the same stars that had witnessed the birth of leopards as a species, that had shone on countless generations of spotted cats prowling through prehistoric forests, that would continue shining long after individual lives, human and leopard alike, had passed into memory. In the grand scope of cosmic time, his actions were infinitesimally small. But to one mother leopard and her cub, they'd meant everything. They'd meant survival. They'd meant future. They'd meant hope. And in the end, wasn't that what mattered most? Not grand gestures or perfect solutions, but small acts of courage and compassion repeated until they accumulated into something larger, until they became a movement, until they changed the world, one saved life at a time. Arjun shouldered his equipment and began the descent from the outcrop, his friends falling into step beside him. Behind them, the forest grew darker, and in that darkness 2 leopards hunted and lived and existed exactly as they were meant to, spotted, wild, unbroken, survivors. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever witnessed or lived something like this.